Great Sword Saint Haas, he was one of the few individuals who were subject to such great admiration, so people would ask him why he actively went out to hunt monsters without a cause, and he'd tell them that his late sister is his motivation. Remember that. Haas was the MVP even amongst the hunters and loved by everyone until one day when he decided to face off against the Shell Dragon, which is basically the highest class of dragon there is. Haas never got in touch with anyone after the battle, and when people went to the site to see if he was alive, all they saw was the corpse of the dragon and traces of a huge battle. They also saw Haas's corpse, and let's just say, he didn't kill the dragon with a steel sword. Dude, he's leaking from the tap. People then went on to search his house and found a bunch of interesting stuff. He was fond of collecting toys and not the ones that kids like to play with. They also found out that he had no sister. So the man was lying about his motivation, which at this point we can clearly see what his motivation was. What a legend. It was publicly understood that Haas was a battle lust, a literal strong battle lust. A few years later, people started to think hard about the way Haas lived his life and tried to mimic some of his actions. Dude just made bestiality cool. Example A, we can see this random dude learning slime anatomy with a hands-on experience. It is the best way to learn. This would then go on to be a trend, and people started to satisfy themselves inside the dungeon, giving us this legendary panel, and I quote, and that's how people started jacking off inside dungeons. Bravo, man. The focus then shifts to a girl named Cheong from a faraway land who came to the continent looking for a better life. She stops by an inn and finds the manager quite weird. I mean, of course, you would when the first thing they offer you is a pair of condoms. Are they flavored? Oh, it is a magical world. Oh my goodness, man. She then sits by the table looking for possible jobs, and a random old man puts his hands on her shoulders and advises her to look up Monster Hunter. She tries to make her way back to the inn after drinking too much, but after being unable to make her way back, she decides to let loose and sleep on a bench. You know, live a little. Oh, but then some random guys approach her while she's asleep and feed her a strange liquid. She wakes up only to find that something strange is happening to her body. She can only assume the worst because, of course, she does. This is a very sus situation. But then the random dudes hand her their goodwill card. It was a hangover cure potion, and they were just trying to be good people. The boys just wanted a good deed stamp. They were just polite married men. I'm sorry. I just love this part so much. Anyways, Cheong is living her life smoothly, camping out in the open, preserving her cash as much as she can. Some invisible force begins to make itself useful by giving her a full body massage while she's asleep. How considerate. It's even so kind enough to take off all the clothes because it's getting in the way. Like, come on, man. She wakes up to notice that all her clothes are off, and the comic goes out of its way to let us know that this was the deed committed by the smooth invisible hand, or Smith's invisible hand, depending on the translation. So some dude named Smith is getting... Can someone hit me up, man? Can you help a brother out? I mean, it says all sexes and all ages. She then heads to the entrance of the northern forest, which is a cave. She makes it through the cave without much of a problem and sees a bright exit leading up to the forest itself. She looks around and notices that there's a lack of flora and fauna despite the forest's reputation and appearance. So when she sees a radish just buried inside some soil, she finds it odd that it'd be growing so out of place. And I can only wonder how they're going to ruin this, and then fix it immediately, and then ruin it again. Thinking that it might be a monster or a rare herb, she decides to pull the radish out, and oh boy, it's a biggie. Not only is the vegetable huge, but it also has eyes and a mouth similar to a human face, and it seems to be having a great time being held by her. She starts to slap the radish hard in an attempt to make it stay quiet, but the veggie is having the best time of its life right now. I like how they have the weirdest, most nonsensical names for this species. This one is the moaning mandrake, which basically starts to moan as someone plucks it out, or more aptly known as the moan drake. A man then jumps down from the trees and tells you to take care of the mandrake fast or the monsters will start to gather around it. She has no idea what to do with it, so the man decides to take it away from her, and holy fakey nature, that mandrake got what it wanted. Literally shut his mouth with a technique that is normally used to make others moan harder. Chiyoung doesn't really have anything to say about this as she watches the mandrake get hydrated to its very core with a ton of vitamin D. He does clarify that that was the only way for him to keep them safe, since the mandrake is known to shut up only when they get to do what that one was doing to him. Chiyoung then sees a hut in the nearby corner and goes inside it. She doesn't notice anyone inside and thinks that the hut has been abandoned. The hut turned out to be more than just a hut because it moves as soon as she enters and her clothes begin to dissolve for some reason. She finds a thin wall and blasts through it and gets out of the hut covered in some weird slime. Since her clothes are toast, she has to sew them back and she changes into just a t-shirt in the meantime. Her body begins to heat up and she starts to feel a bit too excited in the middle of a forest. Since there's not a woman drake, that tends to work on females. She has to help herself and it starts with a single finger. What was one then turns into two, but two couldn't fit, so we go back to one. All this hot and heated action just gets our protagonist thinking about that one time her sister brought a boyfriend home and started chugga chugga choo choo. She keeps this up for an entire hour and then comes back to her senses. She had to. I mean, she was literally going full speed in an open space. The dwarf from earlier meets her again and points at the monster hut, asking her if she did, well, you know, basically what she just did. She tries to sideline the subject, which gets the dwarf to ask if she's okay, as he knows that the monster produces an aphrodisiac gas in liquid. She's relieved that he didn't see anything happen, but that moment of relief turns into horror when she shows her how he took care of the mandrake. That poor fricker drowned in it. It looks like he still has the need for cream also, but we're gonna move on. Apparently he got affected by the gas too and had to make sure he took care of it properly, so oh my gosh, that was super convenient for him to have a moan drake close by. As a parting gift, he gives her a dose of monster secretion and tells her that she needs to study more if she wants to be a proper monster hunter. She thanks him for the spoils, but the dude's like, don't be. It was just payment for the show. Leaving all that drama behind, she still has to get out of the forest and find her way, which makes her wonder why she didn't ask the dude for some directions. She then comes across a fork and has to make a judgment call. We're never told which way she went, but she then finds herself in front of the sea, which also looks like a lake, which are basically the same thing. Despite not knowing what the place is, she decides to let loose and rest there. And how many times is she gonna do this in places she doesn't know? But then a huge creature jumps out of the water. And show of hands, who's surprised? No one? Okay, great. I didn't think so. Meet the man-eating flyfish. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to come up face to face with. Does a few fancy moves before jumping right at her with his mouth wide open. She isn't phased though, to say the least, and she puts out her fist and uses some technique that I cannot describe because I don't get it, to break its jaw open. The monster then falls down and starts to crawl back pretty quickly. Chiyoung notices that there's another woman on the beach side right on the monster's way. She warns her, but the woman doesn't really need it as she makes quick work of the fricker. Chiyoung hurries to the woman to ask if she's all right. Instead of getting the expected reply of, yeah, I'm fine, the monster was way too weak for me, the woman tells her to speak politely and threatens to kill her. Apparently, she was out there fishing and the man-eating fish was her catch, which explains why her mood was not exactly the best. She just sits on a rock with a rod sticking out in the open sea as Chiyoung constantly bombards her with questions. The girl's pretty weird in her own rights. I mean, she's nothing special, just another girl who lives with her parents who runs a sushi shop of all things. The rod then starts to move as she hoists it up to see an angle rotor fish sticking to the bait. She then plucks out the antenna from the fish's head and puts it in her mouth and, Hey guys, Mr. Recap from the future here. I was so dumbfounded at this segment that I couldn't do anything but make this noise. So sorry about that, but you kind of understand, right?
I guess putting it in her normal mouth is okay, but if she uses the entire antenna to enhance her eating experience from the other mouth.
Oh. We get another info card explaining how this monster works. It's also known as the vibe anglerfish. When you detach the little doohickey from its antenna, it vibrates for like 20 minutes. It's great information to know. As weird as she is, this adventurous fisher girl is the only person she can ask for directions from. She points her in the direction of a mountain, after which there's a rock shaped like a sword, and basically that's the destination. Chiyoung goes on to ask that being a native means that she must have seen a lot of monsters in her lifetime, but the girl disagrees. She explains that monsters are rarely seen and only known to most people from books. She then remembers what the dwarf said about her tendency to attract monsters and asks the girl if she wanted to travel together. She gets a different idea about her tone and makes a suspicious sign with her hands, asking if she rolled like that. Chiyoung's idea is pretty simple. She will attract the monsters, the girl will teach her about them and their nature, and they'll take it down together and share the spoils. The girl is fairly confused about it and asks why she would want to use the monster after Chiang is done with it. So you can paint the picture of how these people tend to treat the monsters in this world. Chiang clarifies herself, and then the girl agrees, only if she got an advance contract fee. She doesn't really have a ton of money for her to be giving it out like that, so she presents the secretion from earlier. The girl notices it to be shelter hole sap, which is an oddly specific name, but I'm gonna roll with it. It's enough to make her tag along, but only under the condition that she will be the one to call dibs first. And you know what? Have at it. Chiang thinks that the girl will mostly be interested in parts that satisfy her lust, so it won't be a problem. They head to Canal City and stop by an inn to book 2 rooms. Chiang thinks that 2 rooms is a waste of money and they should share the space, but the girl has a different idea in mind. And how you feel comfortable to share a room with someone you don't even know the name of is beyond me. How have you not asked her name yet? Canal City is most famous for its men, and the girl wants to know just how skilled they are at directions. The manager then lets them in on a small secret. Her husband doesn't stay home often, so she goes to the man living in the house with a red roof at the quay. Apparently, he's the premier product around there. The town is buzzing over a bounty put up over a specific monster, which blows Chiang's mind since it's priced at 5 billion. One of the random dudes recognizes it as the same dragon species that Haas fought all those years ago. It is the offspring of the monster that was so good that even Haas wasn't able to handle the pleasure of the battle and it died from it. Meanwhile, the Fisher girl is already at the man's house and asks him to do a deadlift session with her. In case you were wanting to see how that session went, well, you don't get to see it. That's the neat part, because they don't even show it. We get to the part where they're back in their own inn and Chiang is enjoying her lunch. The Fisher girl wakes up at noon, still yawning, so we know how her night went. She even confirms it when Chiang asks her what her secret to fair skin is, and it's sex. That's the secret. They finally take their time to formally introduce each other, and after 3 chapters, we get to learn the Fisher girl's real name. It's Chung Ja, and I think I prefer Fisher girl. I'm kidding. Introductions aside, the 2 girls don't have any idea about their next move, and Chiang wants to go for monsters who have a high price value in market. This also means that they're rare and hard to find. Seeing her enthusiasm, Chung Ja asks what her abilities are, and she basically bites any of her fingers to strengthen her corresponding body part. And Chung Ja asks what we all immediately are thinking. And in the following panel, dude, this Manhwa just does not care, man. They start talking about an armored dragon, and Chung Ja doesn't quite believe her when she mentions that she saw a bounty for the extinct monster, mostly because she was busy getting hunted, the details of which are now revealed to Chiang. In fact, Chung Ja goes a little too overboard with the details and shows her a mark on her stomach explaining just how deep the cave exploration was. I guess we know what's happening inside the dungeon now. They then get back to the main topic, and the idea of hunting an armored dragon for $5 billion is nice and all, but Chung Ja points out that heading to their habitat is now illegal. The entrance to the place is guarded by Feladine and Baldbarian, who seem to be some super strong baddies or something. In order to get a legal pass, they'd have to prove their skills to the 8 elite knights and gain their approval, so now we have the gameplay loop. While they're on the subject of hunting the dragon, Chung Ja makes it clear that she isn't doing it for the 5 billion prize money. Oh, no. Chiang finds it odd, but then Chung Ja begins to explain one of the main reasons why the dragon is priced so high. It is none other than the story of Haas the Knight, where the main point is that the dragon's remains do not rot for a very long time. They release a fair amount of electricity and are soft enough for the most tender skin. In a layman's terms, they're used to make Hot Wheel toys. Haas was the first person to discover this amazing fact, so I'm guessing Chung Ja is more driven by lust than she is by wealth, and you know what? Frickin' more power to you. At least she's driven. They're about to head to the 8 elite knights to get the pass, and a change in plan occurs and the dragon appears right in front of them out of nowhere. The armored dragon begins to run riot inside the city, tearing apart people and destroying everything in its path. You know, typical dragon things. Chiang is unable to process what's happening, but Chung Ja reminds her that it is her chance to take down the dragon. She knows that hunting is important, but she prioritizes saving people. But Chung Ja doesn't frickin' care, so she pulls out a sword and goes for the kill. She climbs on top of the dragon and sees her gym partner stuck there on the verge of death. She saves him, mostly because of his tool, and she might need to use it again sometime soon. More specifically, after this fight. He does lose one of his hands, though, so those knights are not going to be the same. After launching herself up top, she comes down at full speed with her knife pointed right on top of the dragon's soft spot. Surprisingly, she can't penetrate it, and the dragon just flicks her away. Chiang comes to her aid and says beating the dragon is not an option and she should find a place to hide. Of course, that was never going to happened, and she now prepares to face the dragon herself. Being ready is cool and all. That is, if she was actually going to throw hands, but all she does is run away or chase it around endlessly. Since the dragon is big and slow, it is easy for her to read its patterns and evade its attacks. The dragon grows tired of this cat and mouse game and decides to go full-on berserk and confronts her head-on. Chiang taunts the dragon, and it flies with all its might and tries to squash her with a single claw. She does manage to dodge, but doesn't find a weak spot at all, so naturally she decides to go for the eye. This doesn't work because it has a shell protecting the face too. I mean, you can literally see it from a mile away. I don't know why what was she thinking? Her punch severely backfires, and she finds one of its teeth jabbed hard inside her arm. She manages to break free, but the damage is done, and she realizes that her life is about to end soon. It's a do-or-die situation, and Chiang then gambles everything on one special move, the mutual destruction. She then goes rampant on the beast, punching it consecutively until her temporary boost of power runs out. Anyways, the death and destruction from the previous chapter seem to have simmered down a little, and Chung wakes up surrounded by a bunch of people. She's naked, which is pretty realistic since she fought a literal dragon. She barely survived. You fucking expect her clothes to stay intact? Yes? You're weird. The commander is examining her medical conditions, and she's not quite appreciative of what he's looking at. He's looking at how gifted she is, if you were wondering. She floors him with a quick punch and gets surrounded by knights who are ready to defend their great commander. It was just sexually assaulting a woman. She asks him what happened to the dragon, and they go on a short walk since he wants to show rather than explain. There are relief tents and facilities all around town. Chung understands that it has been a while since the attack. He corrects her and tells her that it's been exactly a week, and she's been basically in a coma for the whole week. She still wants to know what happened to the dragon, and none of them really know. By the time they were there, the dragon had already left. As for Chung, they had found her being dragged to safety by a girl with drowsy eyes. He leads her to Chungja's tent and says that she should thank her in person. They enter inside to see that Chungja's already accepting her appreciation from a knight who's making sure she remains filled with vitamin D, and not the type of vitamin D you get from the sun. Now, Chung is indifferent to what's been happening because this is just the normal for her. She thanks her for saving her life, which isn't really the case. She just dragged her back to some civilization. As for the dragon, they head to a barren region outside of town and find one of its horns that Chung broke. She then recalls that as soon as she broke the horn, the dragon turned back and fled. Chunja has her theory on how Chung managed to make the dragon feel scared. It was mostly because the beast was still a baby who could be easily frightened if enough pain was inflicted. They finally address the elephant in the room, which is the fact the horn is hers for the taking. She has a pretty accurate mathematical calculation for how much the horn would cost. The entire dragon was for 5 billion, so in her assumption, the horn should be at least 200 million. They bring it back to the commander, whose best bid is 50,000. She is, of course, not happy about it, but the commander explains that the dragon is rare for its inner flesh, and the outer exoskeleton is garbage. So 50,000 it is. What, so you're telling me you can just go out and get dragon exterior whenever you frickin' want? On top of that, she has to sell it soon, or else she'll be responsible for paying the disposal fee, too. Chunja surprisingly makes a bid for 70,000, and a deal is made. Her initial bid was 200,000, but Chung got a little carried away and bottled her deal. But it's whatever, because that's all long gone now. It's in the past, man. They got the past that they had planned to request in their hands. And now that they have it, they could easily head to the lava zone and start their journey toward the injured beast. Chunja asks her if she wants to head that way immediately and start the hunt, but Chung decides to wait a few days and take a rest. You fucking deserve it. You've been in a coma for a week. As such, Chunja offers her a trip back to her house since she has to return back anyways. Before they get a move on, she asks a pretty interesting question to Chung. I mean, she stares right into her face and asks if Chunga to actually experience some sausage or not, just casually. She's pretty embarrassed at first, but since they have a long way to travel together, she thinks that she might as well open up a little. To all our disappointments, Chung has had a boyfriend before, and she knows about the delicate arts. Chunja has a good point about her embarrassment regarding such topics. She believes that their bodies are meant to rot away anyway, so they might as well enjoy it while they can. Chung is quite astonished to see that a couple of sushi restaurant owners lived in a house like that. It's pretty big! No wonder she paid 70,000 for that horn. They greet her grandmother first, and her grandmother's first words are, "How are you? I hope you aren't having just organic mushrooms for dinner." Oh! Chung thinks her grandma's pretty cool until she hears her story. In short, the old lady's as crazy as it gets and is strong enough to slay demons. They are then greeted by her elder sister Chun Sim, who is married. I don't know why they thought it was important to mention that, but thanks, I guess. Give me a second. All right, let's continue.
Chun-Sim does have the appearance of a married woman because you can just spot those figures from a mile away.
Her husband must be a really hydrated tall guy given how much protein he likes to suck. I hope y'all seeing what I'm seeing here. Chung feels pretty relieved around Chun-Sim since she seems like the only normal person she's met in the family. They come out of the bath together and Chun-Sim notices a tattoo on her back. She's pretty freaked out about it since she doesn't remember getting it. It must mean something bad since she's hell-bent on having it scrubbed off her back. They try their best, but nothing really works as the tattoo seems permanent. They go to her sister who's supposed to be knowledgeable about these sorts of things. She takes a good look at it, and despite the mild reaction, she's pretty surprised to see that Chung had such a lewd tattoo on her back. What does that mean? She even asks her why she got it on her back and not below her belly. That alone is enough to tell the story of the nature of that tattoo. Since she's not the one who got it, Chun-Sim suspects that she might have encountered a magic caster, which isn't the case either. They quickly change subjects and talk about how Chunja met Chung. She then asks her what Chunja was like as a kid, and it's funny how she finds Chunja's love life so weird. She can't believe she actually had a boyfriend and not just some stud for satisfaction. Chung can't help but ask how that relationship came to an end, which brings us to a flashback scene of them as kids. Oh my, don't tell me they were doing it at 10. Chun-Sim starts to describe her sister as a dry child, both physically and mentally, like the scalp and everything. When she reached her 20s, she was confronted by a boy who asked her out on a date. It's a bit more detailed than that. He specifically asks, "Will you go out with me?" while she's reading a book under a tree, and she replies, "We're already out." Mentally dry was a good remark. It took a long time for the dude to explain the workings of a relationship to her, but he did succeed in becoming her boyfriend at the end of the day. Exactly 1 year later, the dude took things a bit further and started kissing her. Yes, it took him a whole year. By this time, he was also brave enough to say the 3 magical words, "Let's have No, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. She doesn't really understand what he was doing, running his tongue all over her lips, but she doesn't mind. Also, she wants to know why he's so eager to pee in situations like these, because it seems larger than usual. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is terrible. This is absolutely freaking terrible. In fact, she's so curious about it that she wants to see what it's like. She starts to carefully examine her test subject as the dude tries his best to keep the cream to himself. Contrary to that, he also wishes he could feed her some of the cream. And it is this point that I have to voice my concerns. They're children. But hey, I guess some kids do this. They get curious. Doesn't mean I want to see it. Something better was waiting for my guy, though, as Chundra prepares to eat some ice cream, just not from where you normally eat it. She tells him that she read the purpose of a secondary mouth and how it only feeds one particular food. This sucks. This sucks! Man, the dude is about to lose his frickin' mind, but Chundra has no change in her expression as she tries to navigate him to heaven. She asks him if he had fed others before, and apparently he has. Holy frick, this kid's getting more game than I've ever gotten in my entire life! Since he's the experienced one, she lays there wide open and just lets him go to town. Mind you, that she's constantly reminding him of his first time and wants him to show the same aggression that he did before. Whoa, man. Come on, bro. No, not actually. Our guy lets his weapon do the talking and defends his manhood from such pesky insults. I'm surprised that throughout this process, her face just never changed. She did not even flinch. Wow, man. Either he was bad or she's worse. That night, she found the whole "we'd do it with loved ones" idea stupid, because for her, it was just something that happens. It goes in, it goes out, nothing more, nothing less. This continues for a very long time, and eventually, the dude feels like he's just had enough. He calls her out for being emotionless and bluntly says that he feels as if he's dating a doll. Ouch. So he asks the ultimate question. Did she ever like him during their whole 2-year-long relationship? And the answer is no, she didn't. She didn't even hesitate to say that. And just like that, the relationship came to an end. That's not it, though. Something happened 6 months later involving Chunsim's husband. They went on to change Chunja. Her brother-in-law came in a hurry and left her a box, asking her to deliver it to Chunsim. She remembers the gift from last year, which was see-through underwear, and she's pretty curious to see what it is this time. Despite him specifically asking her not to look, she opens the box and sees something shaped like a sausage. Holy frick, that's one large toy. He even left her a note with the gift explaining how the toy was made from a unicorn of all things. And in fact, he shares the entire story of how he came across said unicorn. It was during one of his travels when he and his group were stuck in a thick fog. On their way, they encountered some ancient ruins, and the first thing they saw there was a unicorn horn. Oh, so it wasn't a real unicorn horn then. It was a pretty thoughtful gift for a wife, but loses all its value when he asks her not to use it because hers is only meant for him, if you're thrusting in my direction. This basically gives Chunja all the permission she needs to be a little explorative. She grabs a hold of it and remembers the first time she held her boyfriend's priority. She then begins to pour some lubricant, and it's, oh man, it's getting magical in here. It's pretty dull though. Nothing new from what she'd experienced before, but the horn starts to vibrate really hard, and for the first time, Chunja's expression changes. Heavy emphasis on changes. She looks like she's about to frickin' pass out. It pops out and leaves her feeling a bit scared and a lot more curious about what she had felt, so she decides to give it another go. What is this story about? She started at noon and it was way past night, and the girl did not stop at all. Her face had already given up, but her willpower certainly did not. During the very final stages of her adventure, she starts to get flashbacks of her time with the dude, and her hands move even faster this time. We're getting flashbacks inside of flashbacks right now. And by the time she reached climax, she finally remembered the moment they broke up. Tears finally begin to flow from her eyes and her legs. Ever since that day, lust is the only human feeling in the world that Chunja was able to feel, which explains her obsession with men, more specifically what they possess. Chunja's backstory is complete, and we go back to the present day, finally, to see that the girls had left their home and made it to the dungeon's entrance. They're about to see what happens inside. Finally, after like 12 or 13 chapters, we finally get to see what happens inside the dungeon. We had to go through a lot to get here. We had to see someone's messed up sexual awakening for no reason. Well, no good reason anyway. Oh, never mind. I guess we were just getting a look into their journey to the dungeon. They still have like 3 days worth of trip to make. Chunja is sure that she saw a monster in the woods and hurries to catch it. She abruptly stops Chung and points towards a patch of grass. They decide to wait for the monster to make a move instead of striking first, because that's just how fighting works. Chunja has some other ideas too. She sets up their lunch on the ground as bait and patiently waits for the monster to show up. So are we really gonna call this tiny little thing a monster? What a cruel world this is. Look at it. It looks like something straight out of a child's drawing book, but not Chunja's child drawing book, that's for sure. Oh, big shocker. It's shaped like a banana, and Chunja's also aware of the fact that this is not dangerous. The monster begins to eat the sushi and wasabi, which causes it to frackin' holy frick, is it dead? Apparently wasabi is poison for their kind. Well played, Chunja. There is no reasonable cause behind the capture of that little monster though. It doesn't sell for a high price. They can't eat him, and all they can do is use him. Chunja begins to torture the life out of Mr. Banana, who is alive and angry, actually, not dead. She then pins his mouth against her. Oh my gosh, he's trying to make a banana milkshake? I thought Buddy would start biting that perky spot, but no, he starts to throw his little hands. Oh wait, no, he's biting it already. She asks Chung if she wanted to try it out for herself, and no, of course not. Chung isn't into such weird fetishes. After everyone goes to sleep, Chung decides to free the little banana, which has a different spark on his face. She'll let him go if he amused Chung with the same performance. Oh no. So much for not being into the same fetish. He understands the sacrifice he has to make and doesn't even wait. He unbuttons her top and starts going at it. The banana is very close to being dipped in milk. But Chunja wakes up. It says that it's 3 a.m. It's somehow her turn. Their little party is interrupted by the sudden appearance of that dwarf from before. Wait, what the frick was his name? Did he even have a name? Such a forgettable character, but he's such a Chad. I remember that. Just call him Viking Dwarf for now. I think I'll just stick with Dwarf. So yeah, Dwarf is there, and he seems to be running away from something. He grooves up with Chung and waits for the monster's arrival, and oh, what an arrival it is! Of the Beadmon. It's a tree-sized cock. I'm sure Chunja's excited to see a monster like that. It throws some acid from its mouth the same way any normal-sized animal would do. The liquid is more than just a prank or a joke. If you get in contact with it, you get pregnant instantly. Doesn't matter if you are a dude or a girl. No one's safe. Chunja doesn't seem bothered much, which of course she doesn't. It's a plus-sized monster shaped like the one thing she loves the most. Still, she thinks it's hideous and wants to take it down. They have a very plain plan. Chung throws her toward the monster. She has a knife in her hands and try to stab it from up top. I thought she'd just inflict a heavy wound in her mouth or something, but no, she cuts the entire body in half with a fucking knife. The poor fricker's still moving, so she starts to maneuver around the body, cutting it up in several areas. Dwarf and Chung watch the fight from a distance, although the dwarf feels that they should be helping her some way, somehow, some why. There was no need for them to worry. The monster's insides are torn out, and Chunja makes a successful escape. Not a single drop of acid touched her body. Dwarf is quite curious about the blade that she used to kill the monster, and he realizes that it was made from parts of the armored dragon. Well, I guess we know what happened to that horn. I'm surprised it went to an actual good use. Chunk chokes on her bread and leaves the two be as she goes to some water nearby. The dwarf stares at Chunja quite intensely, but she tells him that he's not her type. We know that can change at any time. Instead, they decide to trade some of their goods, and Chunja gets her hands on a small box, which the dwarf doesn't want her to touch. She touches the gem inside of it anyways and feels a sharp pain throughout her entire body. He explains that the rock is called Pure Exclusivium, and only worthy people are able to touch it without difficulty. The name is so weird because only people who haven't seen Nirvana in their life can touch it, which makes sense why Chunja had such a strong reaction to it. Chunk comes back and picks up the fallen stone like it's nothing. Oh, so her entire story about having a boyfriend was a lie? They stare at her blankly for a minute before Chunja begins to spank her for lying. She doesn't even know what she's getting spanked for, but Chunja insists that she feels sorry about the lie. She finally admits to it, and I have a very strong feeling that by the end of the next few chapters, she won't be able to pick up that rock anymore. The dwarf wants her to have the stone because only people with specific characteristics deserve to have it. She isn't sure of it though, because it's basically a brand that tells the world that she hasn't done it yet. He does explain that it has some usage for weapons and knuckles, which suit a brawler like her. Chung sees the potential of the stone, and she remembers the armored dragon and decides to keep it with her anyways. A major downside is that the smith who works on the stone will have to be pure too, which according to the dwarf is a very rare case. They will need an experienced craftsman, most of whom are old, and old ones are seldom pure. They reach a crossroads and it's time for them to part ways. She tosses him the banana monster from earlier since it's only fair for the stone he gave them. They can't just leave the poor banana alone, can they? They finally reach the entrance of the dungeon and it looks pretty dead with no life form and as dark as it can get. There's a huge pit in front of them and Chunja pushes Chung off of it to see how deep it is. Once she confirms it isn't lethal, she jumps in too. Wow, that's pretty cruel. A bright end awaits them on the other side, and this time Chung is pretty serious about what she is about to get herself into. They enter through the opening and find themselves in a small bazaar full of people and monsters, most of whom are moaning. The whole street is mostly about selling monsters or monster parts for specific purposes. Chung asks a pretty interesting question to Chunja. She wants to know why she's on the hunt when there's a literal mini town full of stuff that she wants all over the place. Chunja explains that these are all common stuff that doesn't make her feel anything. Rare monsters can give a better experience and she won't take anything less. Well, at least she has standards. Now understand that the woman was actually a con artist. At least Chunja thinks she is. She might as well have been God impersonating as a human to give them a blessing. Who knows? If that turns out to be true. Her reasoning is quite logical though. They can't trust anybody in this place, so any stranger they meet is default a con artist. I mean, playing it safe, they discuss their next destination and Chunja mentions a place called the Rock Plains, which sounds like something that'd be on the surface, not in a dungeon, or in Hollywood. She is confident about the direction since the dungeon is interconnected like a web. All they have to do is head north and they're practically set. The last few chapters really have been about new people approaching them, expressing their desire to go exactly where they're planning. And this random woman tells them that their destination is the same, but rumors of monster sightings have made it legally strict to go there. What does legally strict mean? It's actually so bad that every path leading to the north has been blocked. So I guess the dungeon is quite the useless location. But of course, our two girls are special. They have the ability to take it up to 12 inches. I mean, they have the permit to bypass all the security and restrictions, courtesy of the Shell Dragon. The strangers are most impressed after seeing the permit. Chung starts to come off as an experienced hunter who is far superior to the likes of them. She doesn't waste time getting to the point and asks her if they could tag along too. And by they, I mean this knight who has been here like a ghost for I don't know how many panels. Chunja's answer is a dry no. She doesn't even listen to their story, it's a no. She even calls them mediocre runts. I think it's time for the knight to prove just how hardcore he is. Show her how you can harden her core too. Chung tries to be nice. She almost allows them to tag along, but Chunja just ain't having it and gives her a reality check. The two may be capable, but they didn't pass the permit test for a reason. They'd only die midway and Chung would have to deal with it. Despite the cold explanation, Chung knows that she's right about it. She makes an unpleasant face and apologizes to the two, who are kind enough to understand. Our girls make it to the restricted zone where the knight tells them to return. Chung tries to get the permit out, but quickly notices that she just doesn't have it with her. Back with the knight and the girl, they pick up the permit that Chung had dropped. The knight wants to return it, but the girl tells them that this is their opportunity to tag along. Meanwhile, Chunja begins to do a full body examination on Chung, stripping her clothes off. Holy frick, she just don't care at all. Her top's already exposed. She doesn't find it in the top half, so obviously she targets the one final place where Chung can hold it without her hands. Well, really 2. 3? Yeah, it's inside of her. Or at least she thinks so. Honestly, I thought she'd stop after a while, but no, Chunja's determined. So much so that her fingers get a little too heavy on Chung. After quite literally violating her, her, she orders her to get back up and find it. So yeah, that just happened, and we're not gonna talk about it. A random shop owner tells them that their permit was taken by the same two people they were talking to. Chung is pretty positive about them coming back to return it, and guess what? She was right. They do come back. How noble of them. I'm kidding, they don't. The knight tells them that they've already passed. Not passed away, but passed like the location. Man, that would be bad. The two of them venture in quite deeply. They still have the intention to go back and return the permit. The knight says that they've went deep enough and they should return already. The girl, on the other hand, is in search of a specific plant that grows only in that particular path. This little search is quickly brought to an end as they come across a huge humanoid monster. Even the info tab knows that things just got real. Look at the name it mentions. Oh my god. They freeze and think of making a quick escape without grabbing its attention, even when it's literally looking at them. Holy frick, that thing's ugly. There was no escaping its attention because the attention is already set on the girl. He catches her, and I don't like the smile on its face. Oh man, we're very close to knowing what exactly happens inside the dungeon because oh my god just ripped her clothes apart. I mean, he didn't kill her instantly, which is a good thing. Well, even if he doesn't mean to kill her, she'll die. One thrust and it's game over. Hey, it looks like this monster's educated. You gotta know just how good the food tastes before gobbling it completely. Licking is the best solution. Also, the knight's still there. He's cursing all he can with his little sword in his hands, but that's about it. I mean, what more can he do? He does take a huge leap and aims for the monster's head, but he's so powerless that the monster learns human language out of nowhere just to call him weak. And now he's food. There's no licking and tasting involved now. He straight up opened his mouth and ate him. Our girls are outside the gates hoping that they can return in one piece, unaware that not even one piece of them is going to return. Chunja's plenty mad with Chung, but refrains herself, although I can't see it on her face because it only has one expression. The con artist from earlier is having her way cleared up. Apparently, she has a permit. Chunja notices her and quickly changes her opinion as she asks Chung to talk with her. Chung tries to be as nice as she can, but she isn't one for sweet talk, and they get straight to the point. It was never going to go smoothly. She started to insult the duo, mocking them, and telling them to take on adventures that suit their level. Well, Chung has heard enough, and she pulls out her trump card, the Shell Dragon Sword, explains just how serious hunters they are. This completely backfires because this girl starts to boast about how she stole that achievement from her. Apparently, she was about to take down the Shell Dragon too. She's marginally pissed. She even tosses the blade away from her hand and explains how Chung basically ruined her chance to be promoted to general. Chunja fires back with trash talk of her own, and the knight is ready to throw some hands. Meanwhile, the two twats inside the cave are still alive. Looks like he wasn't eaten after all. He was stripped. Oh no, don't tell me what they're about to do, what I think they're about to do. The Omagur asked them if they were lovers, but they become honest and tell them that they were just friends. With benefits, probably, but the world doesn't have to know that. The world isn't ready for that. And dude, for a second, I honestly thought he was gonna have some friendship flashback of his own and let them go, but no. He hoists her up, presenting a better view of what happens between the legs. The knight looks away, but the Omagur wants him to watch her or she dies. I thought he was preparing her for himself, but why is she bent like that? And why is he bringing them close? Oh, I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. Oh, never mind, I'm sure now. Things are heating up with Chunja too, but Chung gets in between the two girls and separates them. The knight girl is asked to behave by a fellow knight as he reminds her of disciplinary punishment. You know what? Tell me more about that. They both turn back and walk away, but the knight girl blindsides Chunja with a cheap shot on her face. And why did I sound like a WWE commentator just now? Chung is majorly pissed about this as she prepares to go rabid, but Chunja stops her. All she says is that she'll remember the knight's face. They're still worried about our little friend duo here, but the friend duo sure are having the worst and the best time of their lives here. The convenience is just out of this world. None of them have to move, and they have infinite stamina to keep going as long as the Omagur wants them to. He wants the knight to finish her all Mortal Kombat style. The poor knight can't hold it in longer than he already has, and well, it's done. His fiance is gonna have questions about their kid. Our knight is a completely broken man. He begs the Omagur to let her go and have him instead. Well, he does have the intention to let both of them go, only if they do what they just did out of their own will. 5 times. Why? He makes a stand. He would rather die than do something so perverted, but the girl says it's okay with a very pleased smile. I don't know if that's very pleased or if she's forcing it. The knight cannot believe what he just heard as he wonders if the monster's saliva had aphrodisiac effects. The monster's kind enough to clarify that it did not. The situation takes a quick turn when the monster suddenly doesn't want them to go at it anymore. He was expecting some level of resistance from the girl and wanted to turn it into a total Netherrare freckin' fest, but now the girl herself just volunteered. The kink's no longer there. They start to bicker amongst themselves, and the monster isn't gonna have any of it. He decides that the time for death is upon us. He's about to crush them in his hands, but two rotating blades cut through the monster's chest. The woman knight from earlier made it in time, and she can already see that it's her lucky day. The monster takes a good look at her. He points out two specific characteristics: pigtails and well-endowed proportions. It attracts him enough for him to ask her if she had a boyfriend. Don't answer that. She ain't interested in any of that. Moments like these are meant for Chunja only. She begins to pull her sword out, and we finally have her name: Dong Bake, a 37th generation monster hunter. And I completely just butchered the frick out of her name. Oh, come on. What a weird time to cut it. Go back to Dong and her Dong. Whatever. Chunja's face is more than just swollen, and Chung can't help but giggle every time she looks at her. She's pretty bummed about losing the permit and getting Chunja hurt, whereas Chunja has plans to eat funeral food in case those two don't return back. They also run out of ideas on how they're going to pass the security without a permit. Remember that random dude who suggested that Chung should take up the monster hunter job? Well, he shows up out of nowhere and greets her. And the first thing that Chunja asks is if the guy was someone Chung would get busy with. That's her way of introduction. The fact that they remember each other over a 2-line conversation is amazing. Also, he doesn't say much, just asks her if he was heading north, which she nods. He tells her to follow him. Imagine this guy is so frickin' epic that he enters without a permit. Instead of heading through the security like anyone else would, he stands at the corner of the wall and just stares at it blankly. The girls are a bit confused about what he's doing, but then he sprinkles something which opens a passage through a wall Hogwarts style, leading to the other side. He tells them that it's the path that leads to the northern dungeon. Is no one seeing them do this in front of literally everyone? Chung is quite surprised, but not as much as Chunja, who is disturbed more than anything, as she knows that magic like this doesn't exist in the continent. She realizes that the man is not someone to be taken lightly, as she tackles him to the ground and holds the blade to the back of his head. Chung asks what she was doing, and apparently no human is capable of such magic. The hooded man is actually a hooded monster. Dang, holy frick, I thought Dong would have the monster's dong severed by this point, but no, her sword's broken and she looks exhausted. Status update: the Omagur hasn't stopped smiling. She does have the ability to summon new blades, but every time she does it, her body shrinks. Why? Chunja asks him why he was helping them and what his motives were. He has no plans to reveal anything and lets her kill him if that's what she wanted. She tries to test his limits with the good old countdown threat. Well, it wasn't really a threat. She counts to 1 and starts plunging her sword down, but Chung stops her midway. She wants to know if there was another explanation for this, since it doesn't really add up to her. Why would a monster recommend someone else to be a monster hunter? I mean, if they're masochists, then there's your explanation, but well, I think that's actually the best explanation she's gonna get. Chunja agrees, but tries to take off his hood. A bunch of other hooded men then save him from having his face revealed. We switch back to Dong, and they're still playing samurai with the Armagur, and it's not really working in her favor. The monster's regenerative abilities are just too much for her to handle. He finally grabs hold of her, but holy frick, those two are still going at it. They don't have to at this point. They can help right now. She needs it. This time the Omagur has a different vision, but the same method. What was 2 will turn into 3 with the sum of 1. He casually mentions that he was sent there by the Demon King to search for the girl who hurt the shell dragon. He even has a description of her, and yes, it's Chung. He reveals these delicate details to Dong, who had just had a bad feud with her. And Chung's back here, and they're still asking questions. She gets tired of the silence and prepares to go all out. The Hood gang senses the danger. Just say that they need her for their great plan. That's it. One of them snaps their fingers, and suddenly the tattoo behind her back starts to act up, and Chung goes into major heat. They literally cranked her sensitivity by like 50 times. Even air is too much. She's driven to the point where she asks Chunja to help her with a little second base. And if you're at the point in life where you have to ask Chunja to help out with anything, especially with something like that, you've hit rock bottom. She does help her while casually having a conversation with the hooded men. She wants to know what exactly they did. I mean, of course she does. She probably wants that tattoo for herself. In a major turn of events, Chunja gets on her knees, apologizes for her behavior, and asks them to put her under the same spell. Turn her sensitivity way up to the maximum, baby. They laugh at her request and ask her why she wants something like that. Her answer is pretty straightforward. She wants to feel again. Her sense is so dull, so she wants to experience such tremendous magic while she can. They want something in return for this favor, and the best she can offer is to eat ice cream. Now, of course, this isn't what they're looking for, but they decide to help her out anyways, because just frick, man. They instruct the two to reach the northern rock plains from where her request will be considered. The only real win here is that they get teleported to the rock plains without a lot of hassle, so hooray! The ultimate goal of this hooded gang is to make the Demon King Ofer and Chung mate with each other. Come again? No, not actually. Armagur is still at it. Holy frick, dude, it must hurt to smile like that for so long. This time the girls are sandwiched against each other. Bare skin while the knight stares helplessly, eyes probably glassed over. He forces him to say his prayer before eating. It's that or death, so the choice is pretty clear here. How long is this going to go on for, man? I thought they teleported the girls to the rock plains. Oh no, they're right on top of the Armagur. Finally, this dude's about to taste defeat. Either that or everyone's joining in on the fun, which I don't know which I'd rather prefer, honestly. They somehow survive the fall as Chunja looks around to confirm if they're on the northern path. The scenery is not exactly what any sane person would imagine, but Chunja has a pretty bland reaction to it. She sees the monster, the girls, the knight, and none of them with clothes on. I mean, except for the knight's helmet for some reason. The monster quickly notices Chung, who is still feeling the effects of nature's wonders. She's still struggling against the heavy atmosphere rubbing her body into submission. He takes a good look at her, and all he says is, "I found you." Is no one going to acknowledge the situation that everyone's in right now? No, we're just accepting this? All right, cool. So I'm the weird one.